Just let me show you this, right? Can you see this? Can you see this ridge here, right? So that's Meltham there. This is not the highest ridge because it goes flat on here, and then further at West Nab, right, it goes higher. But this ridge here, right, it's a clear, straight ridge. Now, this is when we want to be speaking to Howard Crowhurst, right? If you watch Megalithomania, Howard Crowhurst, there are 2 videos, right? Also worth noting now, Dr. Gail Higginbotham's, which talk about where all the cairns are built, facing the sunrise all around Spain, but also in England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales as well. But the Howard Crowhurst, right? He's aligned all the sites over Europe, and they were working with specific calculations. They were building large monuments to mark longitude and latitude, as well as events like sunrise, sunset, the moon's movements, and all this. And they used the landscape itself, altitude of certain places, and visibility lines. That's how their whole culture and learning system was set up in academia with the whole culture, right? Now, this line, this ridge here, right? In Howard Crowhurst's video, in Megalithomania, he talks about Marlborough Hill and Silbury Hill, right? And specific alignments in longitude and latitude positions with West Kennet Longbarrow, and the stones. West Kennet Longbarrow, right, is a long barrow that has a line of stones across the front of the long barrow, right? It has a line of stones. If you type it in, I'm not going to put the picture up now. I could put it up in this corner here, but I'll have to edit it after. And you just have to, like, I don't want to get the picture into your head, right? Well, actually, look, right, I'll just pause it. Hold on. Right, because it's really annoying. You write something, you put it on a group, you put photos for examples, you describe it in great detail, and then, like in the Meltham community group or the Home Firth community group, and then you get people putting comments like, "Oh, why have you put a picture of Dragon Hill up?" When I put in the writing, well, this is barren like Dragon Hill, so, you might look at it now and think that nothing was on there in the past, but this is an example to show that things can be very important in the past, but be barren at the moment, right? People don't seem to... You put a picture, they don't understand why you've put it. Now, the stones that are in front in a line across West Kennet, right? A line of stones to do with a long barrow, and in fact, that is shaped like Pool Hill, because the width of it changes all across it as well, right? A long barrow, right? They got the idea from these long barrows from the natural formations. Now, this one has got an alignment of stones across the front of it, right? There, you can see it from a different angle there. This long barrow is entered. It does have a chamber, but not all of them do have chambers. Some can, but not all need to, if you don't need to go inside it, right? And there are lots of different types, but we're talking about the physical structure of it. Now, Gail Higginbottom, right? Dr. Gail Higginbottom specifically speaks in her videos that the long barrows are unique to the British Isles. The long barrows, right, were not happening in Europe, Spain, France, as the megalithic builders were coming up the coast and building the dolmens and the temples. Okay, so they were building some round and dolmen-shaped, but not necessarily the long barrows, right? So the long barrows are something more specific to our islands, right? England and Ireland and the islands surrounding. Now, there's no doubt that these have to be based on the natural structure that's formed with the weather, but because they were significant to these people symbolically, they've decided to build their own little versions of them around the islands. mainly around the coastline, but not always on the coastline. But there aren't many of these in the east of England because it's very flat. They tend to be more associated with hills or the coast, right? So we've got these long barrow structures. Now, this alignment across the front, right, of here, this aligns, as Howard Crowhurst sets out in his videos and Megalithomania, it aligns with other sites, right? It aligns with them for longitude and latitude, okay? So when we're looking at this, right, I know it's a natural hill formation, but the whole hill formation itself is it's a long ridge. This bit of the Pennines here is a long ridge itself. Itself is, though, if you zoom out, the whole ridge is a long shape. Now, this alignment, right, along there, right, it aligns perfectly with, right, when you look at it, right, across it, there's Dunelm and Castle Hill, right? So there is Castle Hill, which is a long barrow form itself, and before De Lacy put the earthworks and shaped it into like a ship shape, right, it would have been more long barrow looking like Dunelm. Now, the line from Castle Hill to Dunelm, forget that bit because I've got that aligned with something else at the moment, it goes straight across that ridge there, right? In fact, I'll zoom out and I wanted to, that's to do with something else that I'm measuring. So when we put it there, right, straight in line with that ridge is in line with Castle Hill and Dunelm. In fact, it's even straighter now, right? So the line of it, it's something that you can, it's there, and it's something you can use, right, to align something with, right? So we've got there, and there are two other long barrows, or alignments, right? Now, the alignment for it is just, that's the tip of the pool hill, and that's the shallow part of it, right? It's been quarried a lot. There's been a lot of quarrying into it, which has also disfigured it and disformed it. They shouldn't have quarried it. And also the Stand Edge Tunnel goes straight through it. They put a tunnel through it. They put a tunnel through this. They put a reservoir next to Dunelm, which this is all important land at the side of it. We're even starting to build houses there, because this is all what I believe is a cultivation area, the main part of it, although, and the moors is more. But, and then there's Castle Hill, which got carved up by De Lacy. And then we've got the little, well, it's not little because it's 40 metres high, the Warrior's Tomb, which is Liberty shaped as well, right? Now, that's not in alignment with these. But this here changes angle and does go towards it, right? Castle Hill, without De Lacy messing around with it with his earthworks, which is all to do with that stupid Robin Hood's grave, because it's like a bow at the front, pointing towards well, they call it Warrior's Tomb, which is so that goes towards there anyway. Now, so we've got this straight alignment with here, but visually from here, once you go off the front of Pool Hill, you're going down, so you can't actually see over the top of there, but you know, because of this thing being here, right, when there's that ridge there, if you were to look from anywhere, you know that ridge is what's behind it from memory, because then you know where a point is, and if you know the name of it, then you know where the things are behind it. Now, when you go to the top of Pool Hill, there's actually a trig point here, actually, right? But what I noticed when I walked out of Marsden, right, and then I walked up the path and up onto the top of these moors here, right, when I was walking up these moors, here, right? Just as I got onto it, I was looking this way, right? And when you're stood there on the moors, right, and you're just getting onto this Pool Hill feature, which has been heavily quarried and disfigured, right? When you get onto these moors here, right, and you're stood walking up them, and you look over this way, right, you can see that ridge there. Now on here, right, on this goes down into Marsden, but on this bit here, right, you can see over the top of here, right, you can actually see Castle Hill, right? Now, if I put the alignment straight, it kind of goes over where the reservoir is, depending how far you're walking up here, right? And as you walk up here, where the mouse is going now, as you walk up there, because this here gradually increases in height as it goes up, you gradually lose sight of Castle Hill there. Now, I'll get these pictures. So, oh, that's the video. Well, I'll actually play the video. Right, so this hill here, we're on Pool Hill. Right, I've got the photograph. So this is looking across from where I just pointed out on the map, right? You can see there is a moorland that I'm stood on when I've just gone to the very bottom of Pool Hill, right? And that's where that other ridge goes up there, and then that's where it starts going down into Marsden. And there's a building on there, right? Now, when you can see Castle Hill there, right? It's just at the right height, so you can see the top deck of it straight across there. Now, I don't know if you can just see Dunelm or not. Meltham Cop, Dunelm. I'm not sure if you can just... I'm not sure if that is the actual straight alignment or not. I don't think it is. I think the alignment to have that Dunelm in there, it's slightly over that way. But it makes me wonder... But you know where you are because of that little building. Now, when I was stood in between here and Castle Hill, when I was on Dunelm the other day, I saw that little thing there, and I was to this side of it here. And I looked that way and I saw Castle Hill, and I looked this way and I could just see the moors here. Now, I'll get the other photograph up. Okay, this is the other photo zoomed right in. So there's the little building thing there. And this is the top of the moors in between that raises up once you go that way. There, you can see Castle Hill, right? And it is very, very, very... it's important to know that the horizon, right, of this ridge just facilitates for seeing Castle Hill exactly like that. Just like a sliver of the top of the hill. Now, I don't know if this bit just below it there happens to be Dunelm in front of it in lighter green, perfectly aligned. It could be, but I don't think it is. I think it's just a bit to the side, and it doesn't align with it until you're in line with that ridge that goes higher up, which we said, which is just off this photo. It starts to go up even higher, which is where that ridge was. Otherwise, it'll be slightly to the side, I would have thought. That could be it there. You might be able to see it. But the thing is, Castle Hill's a little bit higher, right? So, Dunelm being a little bit lower, I think it's just below this line here, so you just can't quite see it. But why is that important? Because this is a place, right, where we've gone to, right, and looking at Castle Hill, it's perfectly just above horizon line, and something just to the side of it then goes upwards, and if you just go a little bit to the side, then it goes out of view, right? So here we are, zoom back out again, and that goes up then into that ridge, right? And there's Castle Hill there. So I think that when you start walking this way, obviously eventually Castle Hill goes out of sight because of that, but when you get to there and it does go out of sight, that's when you're in the alignment of where Dunelm is. Right, now here, we're at the warrior's tomb, which is right over the other side, right? Now, from this warrior's tomb, when you stood on there, if you look through the trees, right, you go a little bit lower down than we're at now, because we're at Kirkburton now. So if you're on the top of there where those houses are, right, you just see the slither of the top deck of Castle Hill from an important, significant thing, which happens to be a 40-metre high mound, which is shaped like a Liberty shape, right? Which happens to be big enough to fit an entire hill fort worth of people on it, right? Which, seeing though it's 40 metres and Old Oswestry is 23 metres, it's big. It might not be as wide or long as Old Oswestry, but it's 40 metres high, right? And it's a massive steep mound. If it's 40 metres high, then you wouldn't need to have all those additional walls that Old Oswestry's got, up and down, up and down, up and down. This is only 23 metres high. It's 40 metres high, straight up, steep. So, if that ain't fortified, I don't know what is. Now, also note that with the horizon, we've also got this up thing here, right? Along and up. And we just happen to be in a place where we can see the sliver of Castle Hill, but if we go more that way, then it disappears behind here and you can't see it, right? Okay? So here, being here, and if you're actually on that hill, you lose a little bit more, so you can actually seriously only just see it. That's an important point, to see that. You can just see that there, right? With the bit that goes angled up that way. Now, when we're at the other point, when we're sitting on Pool Hill, right, we get the mirror effect. We can see Castle Hill, and then if you go to the side, it slopes up, right? And then you lose sight of it because it slopes up, because we've got that alignment ridge which aligns Castle Hill and Dunelm, right? That is, if Howard Crowhurst was here, right, and I got a chance to speak to him, right, which I would like to do about this, he would say that this is something that is absolutely significant, right, and it proves that there are alignments between sites, right? Like he knows there's alignments that he's measured and found between Marlborough Hill and between Silbury Hill and on West Kennet, Longbarrow, and even those stones along the front that align with it, right? So they had sites that had alignments, and then it was very significant and symbolic to them, even maybe important that you can see somewhere from something, right? Now, also this symbolism of this hill, right? The fact that it's low down elevation-wise, but it's shaped like a Liberty in the middle of a valley. It's almost like you find the Liberties deep in the grass. It's almost symbolic to that. You can find them in the grass. Now, you can find them in... We're not saying you can only find them in the Pennines or only in West Yorkshire, right? But if you can find them in places where a few grow, right? Or even, there are not just one species or variety, like Psilocybus solomonica, right? There are species of the largest psilocybin that do grow in this country, if you know where they are. Not those cubensis ones you get from abroad, which are big, but you don't get a lot of them. You might get them growing in dung, those cubensis, and they grow massive, but obviously you've got to try find them, and finding them growing out of dung they're not going to be loads and loads and loads, it's just more sparse. And the content per weight of the Solomonica ones is higher content of actives per weight. So if you get, a pound of those and a pound of the other ones, there'll be more active content in the pound of the little tiny ones that are collected together than is in a pound of the bigger ones. Do you understand what I mean? They're actually stronger per weight, right? Now, so, and the fact that Castle Hills and Dunelm are both long barrow shaped, right, is significant. Now, when we go back onto the moor here, right, okay, so we're up on the moors, right? We're up on the moors, right, and we know that it was called Marsden, which means bigger, right? And Pool Hill is a bigger natural long barrow feature, than Castle Hill. It's not coincidence that this is a position. So this position, right, look, if you go to a position, right, and find a position where there's a horizon where Castle Hill just peeks up over it exactly, right, which is here, right? Now, and just slightly to the side out of this shot, which is where that ridge is, also aligns perfectly with the other sites, but it just goes out of view. It's just like a kind of mirror image of like when we look at it from Warrior's Tomb. Now, why would you come up here, right? This is when we get in the Celtic mind now, and unfortunately, I could do this talk to a lot of people in England, and they'll just go, doo, switch off, or the dumbest comment ever, like, oh, what's that got to do with anything, right? Put an example photo on, just like that, and you can't have that conversation with those people, because they're not the type of people, unfortunately, right, who are the people who evolved on this island and made these sites, who these sites meant something to, who these sites were created by, for, and used by, and the whole entire purpose of them for understanding it and to bother teaching people about it, right? There are certain people I don't think have got the capacity to care, understand, or be bothered at all. Those people may include people like, Tim Crossland, or they might include people like Claire Farrell, or they might include people, like George Monbiot, people like that, because, they don't put value, for heritage, right? In heritage, you've got, A, be interested in heritage in the first place, B, be interested in history, and C, be interested in many other subjects. Like, you really got to be interested in religion and the origins of religion. You got to be interested in things like university subjects, astronomy, astrology, geography, geology. Without geology, how do you know what the impact of the environment is? Without ecology, how do you know what the impact of the environment is? Where do Extinction Rebellion even get all of the information from about the environment and what's happening to it from experts who are interested in ecology and geology, right? And chemistry. So if you ain't interested in any of those things, then why be interested in anything? Now, this whole petition is getting into rewilding the area because there's been too much building, too much fossil fuels, too much development, too much expansion, and really what we're getting at is, to an extent, that even the ancient sites and heritage has suffered, and we need to restore the ancient sites with rewilding and green corridors and conservation, right? So Extinction Rebellion want to do that. In fact, one of the biggest Extinction Rebellion groups is for rewilding, conservation, environment, and adding more green and trees, right? Which is why they're doing HS2. So if it happens to be ancient sites that, you can say, well, I don't care about ancient sites at all whatsoever, which, they are for the Extinction Rebellion movement is meant to like Stonehenge and places like that. So they must have at least some slight interest in heritage and history. Now, we have got these ancient sites and they have got meanings, right? And we are losing heritage around them. So if you're going to be doing rewilding, which Extinction Rebellion definitely want to do rewilding, and if you're going to be doing conservation, and if you're going to, be doing green projects, if you happen to have some ancient sites that happen to have had too much urban development, it would be good for all parties concerned to actually target the rewilding and conservation with ancient sites, particularly when there's a big chemical factory like Syngenta, which a lot of Extinction Rebellion peoples locally have been opposed to. They've been doing demonstrations outside Syngenta. They've been doing protest demos outside Syngenta. And it's Syngenta, really, ICI, that turned into Syngenta, which is responsible for much of the urban development and excess population growth that's happened to Huddersfield, really, right? But trying to come back to the point, right, of the why would you come up here, right? Why would you come up here to a place where you can see an alignment of an ancient site that happens to be Longbarrow, right? Well, you might have found something lower down that was of interest to you, right? And you might want to find more of them, right? You want to find more of them. And then you might go to a site like Dunelm, right? And you might find more of them there. You might find more of something that you're interested in finding growing at Dunelm all around there, right? And then as you're looking at Dunelm, then you might start looking further and like come up here to see if you can find some more, right? Okay? Now, so one reason for coming up here would be to find, more of something, right? Now, looking back from up here, this is when you can see this alignment, right? Now, what is that? I'm stood up here, right? I'm stood up here and I've been looking for more of something, right? And I'm looking back and I'm reflecting on meanings and symbology, right? And I see that's a big ancient, it's an Iron Age hill fort that's Longbarrow shaped, right? I'm in a place where they're and there's another place that's just behind there, right? Dunelm as well, which is just slightly out of sight at the moment, which is it's all lined up with the ridge there, right? Now, I'm at a place now called Morden, Big Den, right? Where I might be looking for more of something, right? Now, let me look back here. What's that? And they're actually little things. I'm looking for a load of little tiny things that only, one time of the year growing, right? Now, what's that? It's a giant Longbarrow. And what's the other one that's just hidden behind, so you just can't quite see it? Another massive natural Longbarrow. What am I stood on? Massive natural shaped Longbarrow. Right. Now, I'm going to seek, right? What if I want to find loads of little ones? I'm stood somewhere where you can find loads of little ones and we know what they are, right? And Dunelm is surrounded by land which you can find loads of little ones in September, right? Now I'm looking at that. What is it? A massive Longbarrow. Right, where will I go when I want to find loads of the little ones? Loads of little Longbarrows. What happens if I want to go find loads of the little ones, the little Longbarrows? Right? Do you know where they are? Do you know where to find them? I know where I might find some. Around the coastline of England. Not really Norfolk or Suffolk because it's flat. And it didn't have loads of ancient sites over there. And it was covered in water in prehistory because we've found that on the ancient water maps. It was very waterlogged over there before they had the irrigation patents, right? So, I'm going to want to go find loads of little ones of that, right? The opposite of big, modern, right? We're going to find loads of little ones, right? And what starts here is the rain falls down and it all gathers under the ground and trickles slowly into little streams that form into little brooks, that form into rivers. And I'll follow them. I'm going to go down. We'll go down, follow the rivers, going straight past Dunelm and straight past this, and then straight past the Warrior's Tomb, and then straight on the River Cone, right? And it happened to be cone-shaped, and then straight onto the Calder, and then follow that onto the sea to Hull, right? And then I'll proceed to go around the coast of England, and then what am I finding? Around the coast of, all the way around Scotland and the islands, all the way around the other side of Scotland and the islands, then all around the coast of Wales, and all around the coast of Cornwall, and all around the Isles of Scilly. What have I found? Loads of little ones of these. Little Longbarrows, little ones. I'll follow the trail to where they go, right? Now, let's start at the, let's start at Dwarfie, right? The Dwarfie cairn in Scotland, right? It's a Longbarrow. It's made out of solid rock, but it's carved out and it's Longbarrow shaped, right? We're a little Longbarrow, or we could be any of them, right? Little Longbarrows made by men, not natural shaped. Little Longbarrows made by men, right? Where do they come from? Let's follow the trail. So we'll come back, follow the trail from the little Longbarrows, all around the coast, all around the coast. Where's this? Oh, there's some rivers on the edge of it. Where are they coming from? Oh, they're coming from somewhere out to the sea. Oh, we'll follow them back. So we'll follow the rivers back, follow the rivers back, follow the rivers back, all the way back up the river, all the way back, come back in through Castleford, Wakefield, Dewsbury, Mayfield, right? Then come round the corner, by the Three Nuns at Big House, follow the... Oh, whoa! What's that? On the top of the hill there, I see a massive Longbower with the big ones, and there's another big one. Oh, look, there's the Moors. It's an entire massive ridge itself, the Pennine Ridge. That is a big one, right? So that's where the big Longbowers come from, where they're formed naturally in nature. Which is here. Here's a big one. There's a big one. There's another big one, standing out prominent. And where did this one come from? From nature, got formed from the natural ridge. These are the big ones, the big natural ones. And we're not saying they don't have them in Scotland and Wales as well, right? And here we have an entire ridge, which is long-shaped, elongation-shaped. This is an elongation, because that's what this ridge here is. And it goes into Burnley side as well. It is. That's what the actual ridge is itself. Now here's like a basic picture of England, Ireland and the coast. You see in France and Spain, around this coast, which is where you get dolmens and cairns, they don't have Longbower culture. It's specific to us. Now the thing with Ireland and England is this, right? England itself is an elongation shape, which is like the Pennine Ridge itself here, right? Which is an elongation shape. Ireland is, maybe I've done it a little bit too round, but generally it's more symmetrical than here, right? Now, this is the river, right, of what the Boyne comes out of Ireland, and this is the Humber, right? It's approximately, generally, it's a little bit higher up at this side, but it's not far off the same alignment, right? Now, you got three huge, massive, not Longbowers, round temple barrows there, which are circular, and one of them has got loads of little tiny ones around it, like this, right? So, in Ireland, right, we've got this river, and on the top side of the river, we've got these three round huge temples, which have all got entrances, and this one has got a recumbent stone straight across the front of it, not unlike the recumbent stone at Stonehenge and the one that are at the actual other recumbent circles in North East Scotland, which are unique. This one's got loads of baby ones around it. Now, they're quite close together, right? They're grouped closely together. Now, they're a little bit nearer to each other than the three sites in our area, which I'm concentrating on in this petition, which is the Warrior's Tomb, Castle Hill, and the Dunelm, right? These are more like about 1 to 2 kilometres distance between them, right? And that one's been absolutely annihilated. It's fallen to bits. It's been dug out. But these two are all right. But they're closest to the river, right? Now, there's 3 of them, and these are major sites in Ireland. This is a unique place in Ireland, even though Ireland's got cairns, barrows, all kinds of different ancient sites. These are a important, serious place, even though there are other sites that have them, right? Now, that is here, right? And that's generally where it is in the island, along this river. Although the river starts, obviously, from higher up. That's not where the river starts. In England, right, our sites, our 3 sites, which I believe are more Longbower shaped, elongations, big ones, and there are other Longbowers in England, like, not saying there aren't other Longbowers in England, but it's the fact that we've got this long shaped, elongated Pennine Ridge, right, with the three big Longbarrow hill fort shapes, right? Well, one of them is more Liberty shaped, but there's still two of them definitely, and there's Pool Hill, right? And they are the side of the river that goes to the sea at the same level, right? And the old fact of being long like the island, Long Island, Longbarrow, right? And more symmetrical island, Roundbarrow. And that's where the main three of them is. So I think they're significant, right? And now just forget the top ones a bit. Just taking this into account here. So you've got the Pennine Hills here, which I've drawn, for example. And then you've got the Dunelm, Castle Hill, which is high on a nice kind of viewpoint. And then you've got the Warrior's Tomb, which is 40 metres high. It ain't small. It is not small. Because Old Oswestry are 23 metres high. So if that altitude app was correct, and that is 40 metres high, and this one's 45 metres high, natural, you know, it is symbolic, and they're all large enough to be occupied. Now, the distance between here is something like 6 point something kilometres, right? Now, the distance between these is half of that. So the distance between these is like 3.5 or something. So double 3.5 is 6.87 nearly, right? So the distances are in Howard Crowhurst's way of looking at things, and they're on. There's a couple of rivers slightly going in between these, but mainly they are on the bottom side of the river, whereas the one in Ireland, they're on the top side of the river, right? I think that because these are male symbolically shaped and spread out further between each other, like males go out into the environment and spread out further, right? I think that is symbolic to this being a base for something, particularly going out and going around. But so you think, well, where are the little ones? Where are the little ones? Here in Ireland, right? Here in Ireland, you've got these sites. Here, the little ones are on the mother. Where are the little ones? Where are the little ones of these barrows? They're around the mum one, right? And women usually are more closer together and close knit and more communicative relationship-wise, right? Whereas men are more spread out. Like these are more spread out. And then you think, oh, well, if you think of the island one, yeah, well, the little ones around the mum, right? Then that's here, in Ireland, right? Then if this is here and we've got the longer male-shaped Longbarrows and they're all spread out, then where are the little Longbarrows? Well, they're all around the freaking coastline and over in Ireland. That's where they are, and you've got to go on the river and then around the coast to get to them, right? So where you think of where the little ones aren't around there surrounding it. You've got a massive ones on the ridge because the entire ridge itself is a massive elongation. So where all the baby ones around these, you got to go out, follow the sea to the coast to get to them. So now there are people who I can explain this to who will get it, right? And there are people who I explain this to and they will go like that. This petition, this talk is not for people who listen to it and go like that, because those people haven't got the capacity to entertain this conversation. They've got the capacity to put a pub on there and get drunk and intoxicated when there are already 550 pubs surrounding it and restaurants. No one like all of this surrounding there, right? No one like the entire coast being surrounded in Longbarrows. How about the entire country blitzed and bombarded with pubs and freaking restaurants, which is why we have got a diabetes problem, an obesity problem in national health, right? Which is one thing that Extinction Rebellion need to be looking at instead of being obsessed about, fossil fuels or whatever all the time. But that's what the ancient people were studying, balance of nature, balance of all things, right? health. That's what being a doctor is, health and balance, right? And that is what, funnily enough, and you can ask 1,000 people at Stonehenge, right? I'm not wrong on this. No, regardless of what Tim Crossland claims he knows or does not know, regardless of what Claire Farrell claims she knows or does not know, regardless of what Gail Bradbrook claims to know or does not know, these teach people, the well-known as teacher plants, into very powerful experiences that are documented in religion, seriously, world religions all around the world, right? To teach someone, Tim Crossland, not brainwash them, Tim, not get them susceptible to anything, their own innate, inherent capacity to reflect. In fact, Tim, it might be of what evolved that capacity to exist in the first place, which is why there's a majority of people that don't seem to get or understand this, Tim. And there's a lot of people who don't seem to get and understand the laws and rights, Tim, which is why we're not getting them enforced properly and why the government are trying to block us and take them away. Because there's some very, very different drugs to these, Tim, spiritual drugs that teach harmony, peace, understanding, talking things through, not using block buttons, having deep and intimate understanding relationships and conversations like what Russell Brand has been advocating and talking about in his videos, and he does do videos about this, right? Yet, there are certain compounds and drugs and substances which the government are known for taking and have recently been in the newspapers for taking, like, you know, cocaine and amphetamines and drug stimulants, which actually send the people in a very different mindset, which is very selfish, very ignorant, blocking, banning, not caring about other people. And that is, unfortunately, the way the government's going at the moment, which is why they're putting fences around schools, you know, taking away your right to object to building, even taking your right to vote. They're wanting to take away all these platforms with blocks and bans. Is completely different to the way that, you know, just look at the other substances like, you know, MDMA study, which is, it facilitates understanding, caring, discussion, things like that. You know, how could you know, all these DJs be wrong? Who've got nightclub scene culture and things like that. Although some of them, you know, have a mixture of, you know, other drugs which kind of send them the other way, you know. And then we get into the whole culture of fame and popularity and celebrityism, which even Russell Brand's a celebrity, but at least he's honest and he kind of, you know, he openly denounces being famous. It's a byproduct, unfortunately, of wanting to, you know, make a difference in the world, becoming famous. You know, he doesn't, you know, he doesn't say that it's a positive thing. So these Longbowers are important. Now, I put a photograph on one of the Facebook groups, right? And I use an example of the Dragon's Hill at Uffington. And everyone was like, oh, why have you put a photo of the Dragon's Hill at Uffington on there? Now, this Dragon's Hill, right, why would it even show you a picture of Dragon Hill when it's not even in West Yorkshire, right? Why would it show you that picture? I'm showing you the picture because if I am telling you that Dunelm is a significant place to the Iron Age people and the people before that, the prehistoric people before, and you look at it and go up there, you'll say that hill's not had anything on it and couldn't have had anything on it. And you might say it's not an ancient site even. Yet Castle Hill, just nearby it, is within proximity of it, of being significant, particularly when there's Warrior's Tomb, which is 40 metres high as well, right? Now, to understand the current state of old sites and to see, you know, what the significance is, we have to look at other sites. Now, this is a mound, right? It is a mound. Now, if that mound was just there in the middle of absolutely nowhere, with no other ancient sites near it whatsoever, you might question its importance and its relevance. You might question whether there was anything on it before, and if it's got anything to do with any civilizations whatsoever, right? If you just came upon it in the middle of nowhere. Yet, at that site, there is not only an actual hill fort, Uffington Camp, right? There's not only a hill fort, Uffington Camp, it's got a hill fort right next to it, and it's got a white horse in the hillside out of chalk, and the hillside that it's next to just happens to, even though it's not mega high up, it happens to have a ridge that is shaped like the edge of the ridges when you go up to the Pennines from Firth at home. They have these shapes to them, right? It's almost symbolic to that, and something that you would find in those hills, right? And not only that, here we have a shape. Look, when you're at Meltham and Firth looking up at the Pennines, they've got this edging and shape to them, right? So even though this is down between Swindon and Oxford, it's almost like a little tiny mini version of the Pennines in a way, let alone having, the actual Pennine Ridge there. It is almost kind of like a little mini version, like you can get mini versions of Longbowers, right? And then you've got this symbol carved on the side of it. Now, with the hill, right, it could almost be like a little mini version of the Warrior's Tomb or other hills, right? Now, the thing is, look at it, it's just smooth. Underneath it is chalk, that's the white, but it's just smooth. Were there any houses on there? Did they just use it to have a picnic on? Did they just use it to look at the view? Were there roundhouses on there? Or did they just use it as a bandstand for trumpets? Did they hunt on there or what? The fact is, it is a mound next to a hill fort, and there's a long barrow in the woods, a long barrow in the woods, and that's got stone alignment on it. Whether it's the original one or not, we don't know. With the long barrows are associated with mounds, are associated with hill forts all together, and we've got the symbolic horse. So, far from nothing happening here, something did happen here. A great deal of things. The entire long barrow and the hill fort, with the horse, with the mound, right? Which is very much looking now smooth, like there might not have been anything on it before, other than the fact that it's in close proximity to other things. There's Wayland Smithy, there's the horse, and there's the hill fort. And there's even these Pennine Ridge edge-shaped things there. So there is something going on there. Now, when we have, right, this ridge here, which is a long ridge, right? When we have this ridge, and we have, right, not just one hill fort that happens to be, it's a very, very odd hill fort, because it's more like a long barrow than a hill fort. It seems like a bit of a combination between both. Oh, here's another one. It's a long barrow that looks a bit like a hill fort, but just a minute, it's completely smooth. It doesn't look like there's anything on there ever. Well, look at Dragon's Hill. It's completely smooth and it doesn't look like there's anything on there other than right next to it or within close proximity just happens to be a hill fort and a long barrow as well. Now, if this just happened to not have anything in the slightest near it, it's hill fort shapes and size and long barrow shaped. Oh, there's another one, and there's a 40-metre high mound which is also big enough to be a hill fort and contain a large population on it. Now, if that is not evidence that this area has not got but one, not got but two, not got but three sites together, right? 3 sites with the river and the ridge. Now, we don't have a white horse carved into the chalk, do we? We don't have a white horse carved into the chalk. But what do we have is, it ain't surrounded just by fairy rings. We've got an abundance, right, of something that grows and is cultivable. You can cultivate it at certain times of year, right? That's what we've got. And there's a great deal of it, right? Now, you can find other examples of that around the country, but not necessarily in such great abundance. Now, that is the one thing that the archaeologists don't want to talk about. They don't, not when they're doing ancient sites. They don't want to talk about this when they're talking about ancient sites. And they don't want to talk about this when they're talking about ancient sites, right? Because everything is to do with death and the deceased. People who have died, right? Now, even though, so these actually are, these are right back into Sicily in Algeria, right? These are the early burials that people actually are buried in, right? And they still have got the symbolic shape, you know, the fungal shape actually in them, but also the sun and moon and stars and alignments, right, and circle. But it's they're actually buried under it, right, and they're only covered with the earth, right? It's not got any entrance to it. There are no entrances to it, and there are no portals or doorways. The person's deceased and died, right? And they're not coming back to life, right? Not that incarnation of them. They're buried, right? Now, the difference between these peoples, right? The difference between burials is that it doesn't have a doorway or portal, right? And there are not anything in it for activities, sun to shine into it for any reason to let you know what time of year it is or anything. Because if you're dead, you don't need to know what time of year it is if you're dead, right? You're completely buried. Now, there are burials in this country and all over this country, mounds, that may also be used for alignments as well for certain times of things, but not for the person who's dead in it. It is to mark a burial. Now, these places, right, in Sicily, in the desert, these are the areas where all the cave art is found, where it's documented that people are using the psychedelics and mushrooms because they got pictures of them holding them and taking them and having psychedelic experiences, right? Now, they tend to be in places where there's actually something to draw on, which ends up being these walls, right? And a lot of them have recesses which come over the top and have shelter inside, right? They've got shelter inside them. So they were having these experiences mainly places where it felt safe or sheltered, or maybe when it was raining, or, you know, it places that felt right to them, right? And there was actually somewhere to record it and write on it and draw on it, right? Now, that's the two distinct things between, right, having these experiences and the burials, which are different. But yet, there are these two things that happen. And in these spiritual experiences, you can actually have experiences where you do die and visit ancestors and spirits, but then you come back and you come back out of it and you're still alive. That's different from a burial mound, which there is no doorway or portal. Now, I believe strongly that the cultures that came up through and around Spain, right, from Algeria, whichever way you want to send them, whether you want to send them straight over the Strait of Gibraltar or whether you want to go around, to the east through the poppy fields, right? I strongly believe that because these experiences with the artwork and exploring the spiritual experiences, which is all tied into the evolution, it's all tied into the evolution anyway, right? There's some crossover between the structures that they build for the ancestors who are deceased but not coming back, and the communion in going over to these experiences and having experiences which are like dying and dreaming, and then coming back again, and then you end up getting the bear caves, which have the art in as well, right? In France, and all over, that they also have the art in the caves. Now that is creating a sheltered area which feels safe and symbolises coming from the earth, and also it's very similar to being born, because where you have the being born is one of those experiences, and you discover that experience of being born by having the experience, a very strong experience, and then you can associate and connect it with the birth in the first place, right? It is almost like the opposite polar end, because you've got the birth, but then you've got the death. But when you die, you don't come back if you're fully dead. But if you have an experience that is like dying, but like birth, you can come in and out of it, right? Now, there's a lot of people been talking about the ancient sites, which is where you get these Longbowers. Now, a lot of the ancient sites weren't Longbower shapes, and they don't have long ones. They have more circular dolmens, chambers and cairns up through Spain and France, which is what Dr. Gail Higginbotham's been studying, right? Which you can go inside them like Uli Longbarrow and like Cairn Valley Cairn on the Isle of Man, right? Some of them have a post inside it, an elongation shape inside it, which is symbolic of the female anyway, but they are round and circular shaped. Now, something happened in England with this elongated model, this more male model, and the natural form of those is actually in the environment and the land itself, in the hills. Yet the concept of man making a chamber comes back from Algeria making the mound, and they actually found the sheltered place to have the experiences more in the environment. But if you're going to have more and more of those experiences, right, you might start wanting to build your own structure or chamber for them, not having the natural one, right? And also, if it's got a connection to it and you've been building structures just for burial only, there are therefore slightly different uses of these structures. Now, at the moment, the archaeologists are trying to bluff us with the fact that these are only for dead people who are dead and buried, and that's over. Yet, why is it that it's the burial mounds, like the Algerian ones that are completely sealed off, where you would die and not come back? Yet, we've got a culture and history going all the way back to experiences depicted with various psychedelic compounds where they did art and communioned in a more sheltered area with shelter, right? Caves if they had them, or places that were shaped for shelters, or build your own. But why would you build your own? Now, the thing is, right, that in South America, it's a different weather. They've got substances like ayahuasca and things that even the archaeologists are studying, but they take them outside, in the jungle, in the open air. But the thing is with that, it's warm, it's hot, it's sweaty, right? In England, particularly in winter, it's cold, right? Now, if they're having these experiences religious, which exist, connected with art, connected with spiritual exploration, you'd want somewhere what felt safe and warm and comfortable in their terms, not in our terms. Now, a solid structure which was very protective and felt like you were almost looked like a mother's womb symbolically when you have an experience that feels like being reborn, like Uli Longbarrow or like Cairn Valley Cairn, would make sense, particularly if you wanted it to last a long time, and if it was something to do with the entire history and legacy and heritage of your entire culture and the cultures to come. That's what you do. Yes, there are mounds where people are buried in, and yes, they're completely covered over, and yes, that person's dead, right? But there are also structures and temples and places which are more womb-like, because the womb is where you come from. When you die, they don't stuff you into, back inside your mum again when you're dead, do they? Something that looks like a female's womb, where you come out of, is to be born again. So why would you go into somewhere like Uli Longbarrow or Cairn Valley Cairn to die when it's a place to have an experience to be born again? Doesn't make sense. But you go into a mound that was covered over with soil and had no entrance on it because you won't be coming back again. So why would you need an entrance on it? That's the thing. Now, there's a lot of people on websites at the moment. There's a lot of people on the internet who are saying that people are building these chambers, modern ones now, only as funerary places, and they're putting people's ashes inside them, and you can pay to have your ashes put inside it. And that's leading people to believe, generally, and think that all of these places are only for death and for like cemeteries when they're not. And that's misleading, because they're trying to associate these sites only with death. And they don't want it to be associated with the spiritual experience. The church never wanted it to be associated with the spiritual experience. The legacy of the church never wanted it to be linked to spiritual experience. Not in this country. You're allowed to know those spiritual experiences exist if you go to South America, if you want to study it. In this country, it's illegal currently. They've made it criminal. Now, if we want to get some scientific data on it, we have to start quizzing Robin Carhart, because he's got all the data on it. But he won't even enter the context of this conversation because this is all lab research, lab environment and lab studies when you take a bit of paper and tick a box. Is he asking the right questions? Is he putting down the findings of his studies and the effect on the brain and body into a context that might help describe the narrative of the human evolution and the entire birth of imagination and thought anyway? Is he writing it down in that context? Or doesn't he want to go there? Does he refuse to put it in that context and terminology? Right? That's what we need to look at. And that's where we're at with it. And that's why we've got to a situation where we've got ancient sites like Longbarrows and certain bases where you can get hold of these things at certain times of year and do those experiments. But in law, it's forbidden and illegal. And then we've got other places that have got these sites all around. Right? All around these sites. And no one wants to go into the purpose and use of those sites for that purpose. Because they, archaeologists, are professing to us, they're swearing on their lives that these sites don't have anything to do with psychedelics or religious ceremony or use in it. It's only for dead people and people who have died and deceased. Right? And there wouldn't be any reason to create a safe environment that symbolised coming from the earth or from the mother's womb. And there would be no reason to have male or female shaped sites. All the sites can only be to do with death or geography and marking out places. Yet Howard Crowell swears that he doesn't think that these sites and dolmens and cairns were all for burials and for death. Only the ones that are clearly a mound that has no entrance to it because the person won't be coming back from the experience. That's the problem, what we've got. And the Irish don't really want to discuss it or talk about it. The professors don't want to talk about it and discuss it. The church doesn't want to talk about it and discuss it. And a lot of the sites have been attacked and ruined and bulldozed and are being destroyed now. and misinformation being put out there to people about the true use and purpose, that's the problem. So, it's not an easy thing to talk about or discuss, because we can't get the right people together to talk about it. And when they do come together, they're not asking the right questions. They're not